Thabi, welcome and thank you very much for making time.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Can we start with your beginnings? Where did you grow up?
I'm originally from the East Rand. It's now called Ekurhuleni in Davidton, but I've actually grown up in several places. I did stay in a place called Wattville, which is near in Benoni, but I also spent a lot of time in Limpopo, in a place called Seshego.
And where did you go to school?
Different places as well. I went to school in Wattville, I went to school in Seshego, but I also went to a boarding school in Limpopo as well.
And then as you grew up, what was your dream?
Funny enough, I don't have that vivid recollection, because I think I was one of those very quiet kids. My interest was mainly in maths and science, because I spent a lot of time, call it excelling in that area. But I think as I grew older, I kind of developed keen interest in areas outside of maths and science. But I think if I closed my eyes in the beginning, I wanted to be an engineer.
So did you start your career in engineering?
For the first year at varsity, I registered for engineering, and I changed my mind and went and did communication science. At the time, my interest was in production, TV production and radio production, and also languages, because I did enjoy English, and then I put French into the mix. So I majored with my first degree with communication science, psychology, and French. At some point in the mix, I wanted to become a psychologist, which much later on, actually, the paths have collided, in that I do in my spare time a lot of work around the area, around psychology. So I guess I was one of those people who I would call it multi-potential, where I was able to be given the opportunity to explore the many things I wanted to do, and I had the opportunity to kind of dabble in almost all of them.
Would you say there was a turning point in your career?
When I started working, I think it was almost about the job. I think for me, the turning point in particular was when I joined the mining industry, where it had to stop becoming a job, because I got to meet the people I worked with. I got to see the direct impacts of, the positive impact. So at the time, I was working for Anglo American Platinum, and I was very involved in jewelry promotion. So I could see, the rock turning into jewelry. So the impact was almost obvious for me. And it stopped being a job, because I could see pacemakers made out of platinum, AutoCADs made out of platinum on the one side. So the job developed a lot more meaning. But on the other side, I came face to face with mine workers. So I could understand the complexity of their work environment, but the fact that they have a contribution to make to themselves in our environment, but also to people they'd left in labor sending areas in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Eastern Cape. So it had more meaning, I think, at that time. Look, I also worked for the United Nations at some point in my career, and that was a hard job. I always call it a hard job. What it did for me, it made me put my heart into it, because I worked for a refugee, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and at the time there were wars all over the show. And so when I did the SIT reports, the situation reports, it stopped being numbers. It was, the rebels had advanced, X number of people killed. You had to stop coming to do a job. You had to put your heart into it, because people's lives were involved. And I think for me, the turning point was when this thing stopped being about a job. Whereas in the first part of my career, I came to work every day, I knocked off every day. What happened at work, I was able to block it out. But when I brought my consciousness into it, I thought that for me was the biggest turning point.
Now today you're in charge of corporate communications
Yes.
and stakeholder engagement
Yes.
at Sibanye. Can you tell us a little bit what exactly does that involve?
Well, in the main, it involves communicating with different stakeholders, ensuring that they understand the company vision, so that for example, on the employee side, if they understood our value proposition, if they understood the business goals, they would be able to assist us to deliver into those goals. With the rest of the other stakeholders, in particularly community, local government, if they understood the contribution we make into the economy, into social development program, they would possibly also assist us achieve our goals because they saw a direct benefit to their own environments and to their well-being. So my job is to make sure that that storyline is intact, but the relationships we build are based on mutual respect, mutual benefit as well, because for as long as the mining companies exist, the communities stand to benefit. And to try to create a co-agenda is what is my challenge on a day-to-day basis.
So it has everything to do with relationships.
It is mainly about relationships, and obviously there's stuff that we do in terms of projects and programs that we deliver, but those are proof points of the aspirations of the relationship.
And what would you say is driving Thabisile today?
Contribution. I recognize the fact that I have to wake up every morning with an intent of contributing. I also recognize that there could be limitations to my contribution, and my role is to make sure that I give my best into that contribution, because you're contributing into a much bigger space where I find myself right now. So it's just that awareness as you wake up every day that you got to chip at something. You got to make a difference to something, albeit small. And sometimes I've been in situations where the contribution has had a bigger impact, and that's great. But sometimes I've got to appreciate that there will be limitations, and I've got to wake up every day where I've had those limitations, being assured of the fact that I gave it my best.
So, Thabi, let's talk about the future of leadership. In your view, what does the future of leadership mean?
For me, the leaders going forward are going to have to pay a lot more attention to relationships. But they're also going to have to pay more attention to clarity of intentions. I think we now live in a society where there's so much information that people want to decipher it for themselves, want to analyze it for themselves, and the only reason why they follow leaders who are very intentional, who are very clear as to where the direction is going. So that is going to be the big thing. But secondly, leaders who take the time out to engage. Because all of a sudden, with social media and all other platforms, you are confronted with people who are talking back. You know, if I remember when I was a child, my principal, and was a great guy who taught me to love maths, he was the boss. So what he said went, and whether it was right or wrong, it just was what he had to say. But right now, whether you're a boss or your leader, however you define yourself, your word is not absolute anymore. And therefore, you've got to be conscious of the fact that your followers will question, your followers will interrogate, the followers will want to add on to some of your leadership concepts. So you got to be savvy in terms of engagement. You got to be aware in terms of how you relate to people in general, and those people you consider the people you are leading.
Now, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider important for building future leaders?
I think you got to be yourself. That's what I've learned. And having been a woman in a mining industry those many years ago and now where things have significantly changed, there was a temptation to kind of be assimilated into an environment, but that kind of catches up with you. And it's important that people know who you are. Some will accept you, some will reject you, but somewhere in between, they will learn to work with you.
Now, what would you tell the next generation of leaders they should focus on to build a future-proof career?
If you talk about the future-proof career, for me, it's about versatility and learning. You got to be versatile. And I have to sidetrack and give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was an editor student magazine, and in those days we used light boxes to do layout, and I was excellent with light box layout. But fast forward to now, nobody needs a light box anymore. It's all based on computers, so the versatility is important, that even in your own chosen career, you've got to constantly be learning and be open to new ideas that you can incorporate. The basics remains, the fundamentals will always remain, but you've got to be open to doing things differently as well and learning from other people other than yourselves.
Now, when it comes to technology, what would you say are the key technologies that will be driving leadership in the future?
Look, I think with social media in particular, relationships are getting closer. The challenge with it is the time with which you relate is even getting smaller. So previously, somebody sent you a fax, it took some time to come through, you could respond in a day or two. Right now, everything is on the palm of your hand. You've got to be able to be spontaneous. And that is why authenticity is important, in that you don't have to have rehearsed responses, rehearsed engagement. If you are yourself, the challenges of social media is such that you've got to respond on the spot. And if you're acting, you're not going to be able to do that. But if you're authentic, the answers you give will be congruent with who you are.
Now, when it comes to social media, which platform or platforms would you recommend aspiring leaders should be utilizing?
I'm not social media savvy, to be honest. I prefer Facebook as a channel. I love LinkedIn, but it obviously offers me with different opportunities. In that, in LinkedIn, it's really a nice platform to have those, call it intellectual discussions that are informed by research and so on, whereas Facebook is really more about bringing your person into the environment. Twitter for me is still one of those. I'm not good, I guess, with saying what I need to say with 50 characters, and it's not a platform I've warmed up to, but I'm sure it gives the immediacy in that if you go back to where I come from as a journalist and photography was a big thing, if you were smart about it and went to a photograph tells a story, you could be able to harness that as well to kind of communicate effectively using photographs as well. So I think all of them offer opportunities for leaders. It's just really which one you warm up to and how you use it intelligently to serve you, instead of allowing it to be almost like, pushed into your space. You can actually push down into your audiences as well.
Now, Thabi, which would you say have been your biggest success stories in establishing leadership principles, in building leaders, in maybe mentoring somebody along the way?
Yeah, it's very difficult to talk about success, especially because people who experience it are the ones who are supposed to say it was successful. But I think I've recently stepped down as president of our industry of the Public Relations Institute. I thought there I had some higher measure of success, at least relative to the goals that I'd set for myself, because success is relative to the goals that you've set for yourself. So there I thought I had some measure of success. On the other side, I have set up a women's organization, which is called Inspired Connect, where women from different spheres of life, we connect on a weekly basis through the messages that I write. We connect on a quarterly basis through contact sessions. What I thought was useful there was some success, because it's a long way to go. It's where I've been able to use that platform to get women to connect with each other. I mean, some of the women in our network, through the connecting with each other, have helped each other set up businesses. Some have helped each other write books. Some have helped each other get jobs. So that I think is, in some small way, one of the things I can consider as success. And obviously, talking to my career, I think sticking it out is what I consider a success. As you can imagine, I joined the mining industry in the early 2000s, where women were not necessarily a feature, and it wasn't an easy journey. But sticking it out when, in some instances, quitting and going to work for a much friendlier and a much easier industry was an option, I think is a success in my book.
And last but not least, who are the role models you would consider, or future leaders should consider and study, maybe?
Look, I think there are a lot of role models. I think we are lucky in that social media has unearthed a whole lot of people we should be looking up to. For me, it's people who have succeeded in business. So incidentally, I'm sitting here at Virgin. I think Richard Branson is one of my role models. And the reason why he talks to that versatility I talk about. If you remember how he started, I mean, he had a record company, then next thing he's into airlines. He's versatile. He's able to not be married to an idea, but he's married to a concept of success. So I think for somebody who's living, he's for me, a role model, particularly for people who are interested in business. But for people who are obviously interested in consciousness, you have the likes of Nelson Mandela, who have shown us that being authentic to your vision, being authentic to your course, ultimately gets you there. So from that perspective, I think Nelson Mandela is one. And of course, if I look at somebody living, and I'm a woman, Oprah is a great role model, I think, for young women. Again, who then, and I think why for me she is she kind of, and I come from the township, so perhaps that's where our journeys kind of maybe are similar. Your start is not your finish. And it should not even determine where you want to go. And I think she has redefined that for me and many other younger women who are younger than me, to say, don't be preoccupied about your current circumstances. Use them to launch yourself into something bigger. So that storyline that says, I come from a disadvantaged background, I've had a difficult childhood, should not define how you then lead yourself into what you aspire to become.
So Thabi, how can people follow you? How can they connect with you? How should they communicate with you?
Look, I'm great on Facebook. I think people can communicate with me via Facebook. And those who, because in our network, we actually have a mentorship section. Those who want to join our network, unfortunately, is women only. So we're not being sexist, but we feel that our scope of influence is around women. They can all obviously follow us on email. We've got an email that connects us to the Women's Network. We are actually redoing our website, so soon people would be able to get into our website, get mentors, advertise their businesses, talk to different people for different reasons. So yes, I do have a network email that I'm happy to share for those people who want to get into direct contact, because the difference with our network is we're not a lot of people. We want to be able to provide direct contact to reach out for people so that they don't feel like they're a number, but they feel acknowledged as a human being.
Right. So Thabi, is there one thing that you would really like your listeners to take away from this interview and implement in their career?
I think one thing for me is live with an attitude that says anything is possible. Yeah. But secondly, don't get sidetracked by things that are not taking you where you are going. And if those are the two things they can take away, I can imagine they would have a very successful career and perhaps successful not only in the workplace but in other environments where you really are single-minded about your goals and you protect them with all you have.
Well, Thabisile, thank you so much. You are a role model and an inspiration. So I hope many listeners will take a leaf from your book and implement it in their lives.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.